continuing on in the halachas of Rosh Hashanah, Siman Tavkov Pei Zayin, Siman 587, Din Hatakeya L'Sei Chabar, the laws of someone who's sounding the shofar inside a cistern, Uvay Hesifim, and has 5 sifim, obviously a lot shorter than the last Siman. So well done to those who learned the last Siman well. This Siman is a lot shorter, and just based on the title, it seems a little bit out of the ordinary. Who's going to be sounding a shofar inside a cistern? That sounds like someone was, being thrown inside a wine barrel or had a really crazy Purim and ended up upside down inside a barrel or something. But we're going to see there is a practical application which we're going to get to shortly. So let's jump right in. Shmias kol shofar tzarich aliyos below irbov kol achar klau. The sound of the shofar has to be without a mixture of any other sounds at all. Like we learned previously, even the bracha is what? It's not on the shofar itself, it's on the sound of the shofar. It's kiyah shofar. So you want to actually be hearing the shofar. You don't want to be hearing a mixture of one shofar with any other sound, and certainly not with a non-shofar sound. And even, like we just learned last Siman, even 2 shofars together is not okay. So it has to be one pure shofar. Aval im shama ko b'erbuvia, and therefore if you heard the sound of a shofar mixed with something else, well yatsa, you do not fulfill the obligation. Therefore, so now, if you are standing inside a big barrel, I don't know why, but that's your choice. Or you're standing inside a cistern. Or you're standing in a dus. What's that? It's a building that's primarily underground. Whoa, we got a practical application. What do we call your building structure that's mostly underground? A basement. So if you're standing in a basement, now if the building is majority above ground, even if it starts underground, whatever, if the majority is above ground, we call that a house. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about a building that's primarily underground. And similarly, someone who's standing inside a cave. Now, what happens in these? You're in your cave, you're in your giant wine barrel, whatever it is. And the people listening are outside. I mean, why would they want to be in the wine barrel with you? Now, if they're sure, I heard the shofar, I'm positive, I know you're inside your wine barrel, you're inside your basement, but what I heard was the shofar, okay, yatsu. They did their mitzvah. If they're not sure, well, yatsu, then they're not. Because remember, you have to be sure that what you heard was the shofar itself. And I'll point out that amongst the Rishonim, there's a lot of disagreement about if you're in the basement or in one of these structures, people are standing outside, are they yaitzi from hearing shofar or not? And it's the way the Alter Rebbe splices it, so to say, is incredible, because he's really saying ultimately the issue is you have to hear the one sound. So if you're sure you heard the one sound, okay, good. And if not, then he's going to go like the Machmirim and say that you're not, Yatsu, you didn't fulfill your obligation. So what's the issue when the person blowing the shofar is inside the cistern or the cave or whatever? The sound itself is going to get affected by the moisture or whatever is in the air before it goes out. So the whole sound of the shofar, the sound waves are going to be affected. And what's going to happen? You could hear what's called a kol havara, a echo sound. And the echo is not the shofar. And therefore, that's going to be an issue. And that's why we need them to be sure that what they heard was the shofar itself. Now the Alter Rebbe is going to add a little caveat. V'tayv l'hachmir, but it's good to be machmir. Even if you're sure that what you heard was the shofar, don't be so certain. You know what to do? It's an easy solution. You find the Chabadnik who has a shofar and you say, can I hear another one? Hear another set of tekiyas. However, what's going to be the question? Oh, I make a bracha. The answer is shaloi don't make a second bracha. However, you can and should make a bracha if you're positive what you heard is the echo, because that's not a question of suffix. You're saying you were in a basement, you're in a cistern, in which case there is a possibility that the sound coming out is going to be an echo. And then on top of it, your own ears know that what you heard wasn't the shofar itself. In that case, there's not really a suffix. So yeah, go ahead and make the bracha. The suffix of brachas will hakel. Usually, when we have a question about brachas, we're lenient. We don't make another bracha, which is why if there's a question, like in that first example where the guy was in the cave, you're pretty sure you heard the shofar, so theoretically you're fulfilled your obligation, but nonetheless the Alter Rebbe is saying, you know what, just hear it again because of this halachic question, so therefore there is a suffix, and therefore you don't make a bracha. But in the second example, where there was already a question because the guy's standing in the basement, and what you heard is definitely in your mind an echo, which is a possibility because he's in the basement, therefore it's sure that what you heard wasn't a kosher shofar blowing, and therefore you make a bracha. So everything we just spoke about above is what? Is that the person sounding the shofar is inside, right? He's in the basement, he's in the cistern, he's in the cave, he's in his big barrel, and everyone else is outside. So Beis is going to explain that. Beis, B'med Devarim HaMordim, when does everything we just said apply? It applies when the people are standing outside the cistern. Aval hatakeya atzmai. But what about the guy sounding the shofar himself, the Baal Takeya? And this time he invites friends inside the barrel with him. Yatsu, the guy blowing the shofar, his buddies hanging out in the cistern with him, they've all fulfilled their obligation. Why? Because it's certain that what they heard was the sounds of the shofar. Because they're inside with him. When does this all apply? To that cistern, to the basement, to the cave. Avo, but a large barrel, shehavarasa gedela, that's just going to echo around loudly. No matter what they're doing inside this barrel, what they're going to hear is not the shofar. Baal Takeya is not going to hear it. His friends hanging out with him inside the barrel. It's a good friend. He's inviting him in the barrel with him. That's going to be an echo. And therefore, it's going to go back to what we said in Aleph. You're going to have the same rules. There's a high chance for an echo. If they're sure what they heard was the shofar, amazing. The Alter Rebbe says, Yatsu, they fulfilled their obligation. They're Yatsi. And if they're not sure, good chance what they heard is an echo, and therefore, they got to step out of the barrel and hear it again. Gimel. This is an interesting one. Im hischel itkaya babar v'Allah chutz lebar v'gamar esatakia shehischel babar. So this is someone who starts out inside the cistern and he's blowing the shofar, and he's going out and he finishes blowing the shofar. It's a long takia, and he finishes when he's already outside. Yatsi yedei chavaisai. Everyone fulfilled their obligation. Shekol ma sheshama bein kishahaya bifnim bein kishahaya bachutz haya bevadai kol shofar. Because everything that he was listening to, both when he was in, without, he heard his own shofar, so he is good. The im kisha'ala mehabar haitzi aznav chutz ubar koidim shahaitzi a shofar chutz v'yatsa. But if he is going up and his ears are above the edge, so his ears are outside the cistern, but the shofar is still in it, what's that the example of now? That's like Aleph. That's the same as having the guy blowing the shofar inside the cistern and the listeners outside. It's just now in one person. Because again, the shofar blowing his shofar is inside the cistern. So I guess he's tilting his head forward or whatnot. And his ears are above it, so his ears are like the outside people. So what's the rules going to be? It's going to be the same as we had in Sif Aleph. So we're saying that in that case, lo yatsa, he doesn't fulfill the obligation. Ela im ken barer lo shaborega hahi shama kol shofar. He didn't fulfill his obligation unless he's sure that what he heard was the shofar. So same as in Aleph. Ulefi she'i efshar with samsem sheyotzi haznaim b'shofar ke'achad. And since, and the Alter Rebbe is being practical, it's not practical that the ears and the shofar are going to both always be at the same level at the same time. Like, how's the shofar going to get out of the barrel at the exact same point as the ears? Because the shofar is attached to the mouth. It's not going to happen. Therefore, in that situation, it's good to raise up the shofar before it. In other words, this way the ear shouldn't be out first. To us, because then what's going to happen is now it's not the case of the shofar inside the cistern and you're outside it. Rather, if you raise up the shofar first, if you tilt your head backward enough, the shofar is going to be above it. Then it's going to be the case of someone blowing shofar outside the cistern and a person inside it, which is not an issue, because there's not going to be an echo in that way. So now what if his buddies were hanging in the cistern with him when he started to sound the shofar before he's getting out? They fulfilled their obligation even though they're not going up out of the bar with him. They're yotzim tekiyas. Because when the people are inside the cistern, and now he's, so to say, the shofar, which means the Baal Tzakea practically is outside it. So what are they hearing? They're hearing the shofar, because now it's a case of a shofar outside the cistern and the people inside it, which is not an issue. Dawid. Hashamea miktas tekiyas kil shofar and miktas kil havara. Now, here's a general rule, and then we're going to see how this plays out. If what you're hearing is part normal shofar sound and part an echo, what's the rule? So then we have an admixture. For example, let's give an example. Someone's outside the cistern, and the person, the Baal Tzakea with the shofar, is inside the cistern, in which case maybe there was an echo, and then left it, completing it. So you have the guy on the outside is hearing first the echoey tekiah, the echoey shofar sound, and then he's hearing this long tekiah, he's hearing the after part as the Baal Tzakea is leaving the cistern, sounds normal. So that's going to be an admixture, right? Let's give another example of someone who's hearing part of a shofar blast and not part. This is someone who's hearing it when he has an obligation, when he doesn't. So it's almost like you have, again, a kosher shofar and a not. Someone is a real gunner and they're waking up early and they blow a shofar before you have the obligation, before daybreak, when you don't have the mitzvah of shofar. And then the shofar goes into daybreak. So part of the shofar blow wasn't a mitzvah shofar blow, it was too early. So it's almost like in the previous example, an echo. And then in the few seconds later, it's now a kosher regular shofar sound. So again, you have an admixture. Another example. So someone is just middle of blowing shofar for fun, they're doing it as an instrument, and someone walks by and says, "Ooh, you know what? I need to hear shofar. Can you do it for my mitzvah? Have the kavanah." So midway through, the guy changes his mind. Instead of blowing it for fun, now I'm blowing it to give you a mitzvah. So again, you have an admixture. You have a sound that wasn't a kosher shofar blow, like the echo, like the shofar sound that was before daybreak, and then you have an admixture of a kosher shofar sound. What's the halacha? Does this count? Kol elu kevan shemiktas hatakiya hu shelo besikna afal pi shemiktasa shehi besikna yesh ba shir takiya she's bar b'siman tavkov tzadik lo yatzedei chavasai. Now, in all of these, even though part of it is a valid takiya, a valid shofar sound, and in fact, we're going to learn about what makes it a valid sound, how long. So we could say, lengthwise, guy has good lungs, so he's in the cistern blowing it for a few seconds, and then he's outside blowing it. The kosher part is 5 minutes long, the longest tekiah gadol you ever heard. It doesn't matter. it had an admixture of something not kosher. A shofar blow has to be kosher, has to be real, has to be legitimate, has to be with a chiyuv from beginning to end. So you start blowing the shofar with an echo, and then after you're outside, no good. You start blowing the shofar before daybreak and keep going after, no good. You don't have kavanah at the beginning and only have kavanah at the end to fulfill the obligation for people, no good. Has to be kosher from start to finish. And of course, the flip is also true. The ends can't be messed up. Hey. So now, what if someone's in shul, blowing shofar, and there's people outside? They're not, right at the wall. They're a little distant. They're not sure if they heard the shofar. It was an echo. They're not sure what they heard. They have to hear a second shofar blowing, because it's possible they heard an echo from inside the shul. But if they know 100% they heard the sounds of the shofar, then they do not have to hear it a second time. They don't have to be strict. They are good. So that's the end of the Siman. Just to review, in the first sif, we discussed the general rule, the klal, that when you hear the sounds of the shofar, it has to be a pure one shofar, cannot be mixed with anything else. And then we went through a rather long example of someone blowing a shofar inside a cistern, a barrel, a cave, a basement, whatever it is, and the issues with that. And because it can make an echo, the halacha is that people standing outside of those structures have to be 100% sure they heard the shofar and that there wasn't an echo. If they're sure, good. They're yotzi, they fulfilled their obligation. Although the Alter Rebbe says it's taiv lachmir, it's good to be strict and hear it a second time without a bracha. Now, if they're not sure what they heard, they should hear it a second time. And the Alter Rebbe doesn't directly address whether they should say the bracha or not for this example. And third, obviously, if they know that they heard an echo, then they have to hear it a second time with a bracha. The second sif we clarified, I should say, that in Aleph we're talking about people outside the cistern or outside the basement, whatever it is. And that's the example of a person blowing shofar inside and everyone else is standing outside. And we said that this doesn't apply, though, the same way to a large type of barrel, because that has lots of echoes. In Gimel, we gave examples of someone ascending outside the cistern, outside the basement, and the position of their shofar. And we said that they really have to ideally get their ears to be below the shofar, so that as they're going out, the shofar is outside the basement or the cistern first. And then it's the example, it's the case of someone outside a cistern or basement, and the listener is inside, which is not as much of an issue. In Daled, we talked about admixtures of the shofar itself. We gave 3 examples that part of the shofar blowing was first an echo, and then the next part was pure tekiah, pure shofar blowing. Next example was someone starts blowing before the allowed time, before daybreak, and keeps blowing after. The third was someone didn't have kavanah in the beginning and then did have kavanah. In all those, they are not kosher shofar blowings. You're not yotzi. You're chiyuv, because it was an admixture. And we know that it has to be a kosher shofar blowing from start to finish. And finally, in Hay, we talked about people who are standing outside a shul from a distance. And we said the same examples go here, that if they're sure what they heard was the shofar, they're good. And if they're not certain, then they have to hear the shofar blowing a second time.